Member for Grey, Rowan Ramsey. Got a big electorate covering many parts of the north and west of South Australia. Rowan, how's the electorate holding up, not only with wind and rain, but also power outages?
Well, it's had a fair hammering over the weekend, without a doubt. We were up at Yunta, and I think the worst of the storms evaded us there on Saturday night, but drove down from Jamestown through to Yadunda yesterday, and the damage to the crops in particular around Burra, pretty much all the way down, I'd have to say. Barley, oat crops are really smashed around, and I reckon there's a lot of hay on the ground there, and I can't imagine that being too much good. So, and that's probably a bit wider spread than that. I saw some more damage back around Gladstone when we came back up heading towards home. And the power outages, well, these things happen when you get thousands upon thousands of lightning strikes, and we can all get upset about it, but the insulators get hit with the lightning, and it takes the crews a long time to fix it up. And I know there'll be damages and losses to businesses and to homes and freezers full of food and all that kind of stuff. That's nature throwing her best at us, I guess, but it would be good to see it all shut off, because I can tell you, Ricky, I think probably the biggest crop we've ever seen in South Australia, certainly over here on Eyre Peninsula. I am this morning. Best crops I've ever seen on our farm, best crops I've ever seen across the Eyre Peninsula. And the headers are just itching at the edge of the paddock. There's a bit off, but they want to get a lot more off. Just crop yields we've never heard of. Now, I suspect that's a lot wider spread than just here. So there's downside on it, but there's more money in mud than there is in dust. I think that's the underlying principle of all this.
Yeah, good point. We are picking up from not only Viterra but also Teaports. Good receivals, especially over on the west coast, of the amount that's coming in. And we do hope and pray that there'd be some dry so farmers can get their crops off.
Well, absolutely. And then, of course, they're not in my electorate. And you think about the Riverland blokes up there that have got a flood coming down the big creek. And I don't think any rain at the moment will be worrying their fruit and their grapes, but I'm no expert on it. I think it would be probably helpful. But there's wheat farmers out in the valley there everywhere, and they got some pretty good crops as well. And it's a two-edged sword when it's raining, particularly at this time of year. So we're just hoping for the best. We just need to dry up and get back to being December, because I'm looking out my window at the moment. It looks more like July than December.
Yeah, it might be snowing for Christmas at this rate.
It could well be.
Hey, Rowan,
go on, sorry.
Yeah, speaking of snow, you've been over in Canberra recently. I'm sure it was bitterly cold over there, but you've been reminding voters about a whole lot of surprises that emerged from Labor since the election that's coming to light in federal parliament.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously we've been dealing with that IR bill this last week, which I think is really bad news for Australia. It's got to get through the Senate yet, but and the government needs a little bit of help there, so we'll see what happens. And I think it turns back the clock, not to pre-Hawke era, almost back to Whitlam, quite frankly, and the potential for this to all blow up in our face just when we're facing quite a challenge with inflation rising and the ill winds around the world. But it was the things that they've been doing and announcing that they didn't tell us about the election that I was focusing on. And there's a proposal around at the moment they brought up to give New Zealanders a vote in Australian elections now. It's always been Australian citizens that have voted in Australian elections, and we're good friends with the New Zealanders, but I don't know why we'd give them a vote in our election. We were told that to bring back the foreign fighters from Syria and Iraq. Well, we never knew anything about that before the election. They could have told us about it. They didn't announce that they were going to unrecognise or disrecognise Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and people might think it's a good idea, but they didn't tell us about it. They didn't tell us about the idea that they were going to sign on for a 30% reduction in methane emissions, which includes the cow belches and farts, I suppose. They didn't tell us they were going to bring back pattern bargaining, which is what we dealt with in this last week with the IR bill. They didn't tell us that they were going to extend the area of workforce shortage, which is the thing that we use to get doctors into rural Australia from overseas, foreign trained doctors. There's been a leg up for the more remote areas to get those doctors. Well, they've taken those provisions right into the suburbs of the capital cities, which means we no longer have an advantage out here in the country, right at a time when we've got the worst doctor shortages that we've seen in living memory. And the other one Labor has thrown up is they're going to lock up 30% of Australia in parks and reserves. Now, we're about 20% at the moment, and I didn't say anything about this before the election. People say, well, I love parks. Well, where are they going to get them from? They're certainly not going to stop the capital cities spreading out and sprawling. It can only come from agricultural area, and a lot of places where we've seen big parks set up, particularly in the outback, we're dealing with feral pests and including native species as well, out of control, kangaroos, emus, all that kind of thing, which is just going to actually blow the roof off with the season they're having up there at the moment. The breeding rates will be enormous, so we'll be dealing with all of that all over again. So it's, if they were going to do all this stuff, and why didn't they tell us? We're only 6 months in. It all looks to me as this is the things they had decided before, but we won't tell anyone. We'll get into government first and then we'll get on with the job.
It does have a smell of, so soon after the election in May, that these were sort of not the promises they made publicly, but the shadow promises they made to key interest groups or even donors like the union movement when it comes to patent bargaining. And they just get to hell with the consequences, just ram it all through the parliament so that the heat's gone before the next election.
I think you're completely onto it, and particularly that deal with the unions. This is the payoff in my speech when I spoke on the IR bill, and there was one of those that got ran through late at night, and we didn't get long to speak on it. But it clearly is a payback. In the end, I think Peter Dutton said in his speech that the union movement has given $100 million to the Labor Party since 2007. $100 million. And so we know where the money comes from. We know who controls their pre-selections, and now they're just paying the piper, I think. And we're all going to wear the price of it. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. The Labor Party people in this bill said, "Oh no, that won't happen again. We've learned from the past." Well, we'll see what's happened, because the rules have certainly changed, and they've changed out the Australian Building Construction Commission as well, which was the watchdog on the beat. And when we've had that in place, it's dropped the number of strikes down.
I understand these are big debates in Canberra, but how does that the IR stuff, patent bargaining, how's it going to touch the voter and the small business owner, for instance, and the farmer in regional Australia?
Well, that is the very big worry with this. Is I think it is going to. There's a clause that if you've got under 15 workers, so 14, theoretically you don't have to participate in this area, but in fact, that head count is a head count. It's not an FTE for a start. And secondly, the union will have to sign off, even if you've got a workplace where the employer and the employees have reached agreement, they have no union members, the union will have to sign off on the agreement.
So if you're a bakery or a cafe that relies on a whole heap of junior casuals, if you clock up to 15 of those, regardless if they only work every third week, that's going to tick you into this patent bargaining. That's
as it sits at the moment, and we have very great concerns about that. So we know union membership is dropping across the nation. They're down to 14% at the moment and only down to about 9% in private enterprise. And this is a way for them to get their boots in the door and try and get their memberships back up, in my opinion. It's a monumental bill. It is the biggest change in industrial relations we've seen in generations. So, and it is Michael J. Fox's Back to the Future, I'm afraid, and I don't think we're going to like the look of it. As I said, it's still got to get through the Senate, and they are dealing with the senator from Canberra, trying to tie up his vote. They're determined to get it through by the end of this year, so we've only got 2 weeks of Parliament left. So we'll see what happens with that, I guess.
Well, we certainly will. It does sound like the next sequel to the Back to the Future franchise. Yes. Rowan Ramsey, thanks very much for joining us today on Flow.
No problems, Ricky. Good to be talking with you.